Hello, welcome back to Project Kermit. Well, some of it anyway. This is pretty much the entire steering system. I've laid it out like this so we can get an idea of how it works before I install it on the truck. So you've seen in the last episode me dismantling the steering box here, and that takes this kind of motion into this kind of motion through this arm. That works this rod here. Yeah, it's another one of these rod linkage things that Land Rover are so fond of. That then operates this arm on here in this steering relay, which has this on the bottom of it, which pulls on this, which attaches to one of the wheels, and then this attaches the wheels together so that moving one wheel moves the other wheel. The reason I've laid it all out like this is to illustrate a couple of points. The first one is that you can see, just by looking at this, where a Land Rover, an old Land Rover, would get its reputation for poor steering. You can imagine each one of these joints with a bit of wear in it, all that adding up over the whole system, plus you've got the potential for play in the wheel bearings and the axle swivels and the tyres. Adding all that together, and you can see why it could become very, very vague. The other point I want to make is it doesn't have to be that way. This, although there's rather a lot of components, is very simple. It's a very simple system, and it's entirely possible to maintain it to a decent standard, and then your old Land Rover, the steering will be perfectly adequate. On this one, there are a couple of unknowns. So one unknown is, can I make this steering box any better than I made it last time? Possibly, we'll get to that in a moment. The other unknown is this relay. So this is off of Kermit. This is the one that came with the truck. It's a very simple mechanism in principle. All it does is transfer movement from up here above the chassis to movement down there below the chassis. It's also got a massive spring in there, which hopefully I won't have to mess with. Now, I don't know if this one's a go or not, so we're going to test that now. If it's not any good, I do have a backup option. Well, I've got two backup options, but we'll see. So the first thing to do is to check how stiff this mechanism is. I've got my spring balance or luggage scales, and what we're looking for then is resistance to rotation, relay shaft, 6.8 to 12.2 kilograms, or 15 to 27 pounds in old money. 15 is there, 27 is about there. So between my fingers, oh dear. All right, well. Move it at all. Yep. So what I know about these is that one of these screws in here is for draining it. One of these screws in here is for filling it. So what I'm going to do now is drain out whatever's in here, put in a load of WD-40 or something thin like that, work it backwards and forwards and see if we can free it up a bit. I'm going to leave that to soak for a bit and see what happens really. Those of you with very long memories might recall that way back when I was starting work on the bulkhead, I showed you a bulkhead that I wasn't going to use, that was just horrible. It is a horrible bulkhead, but it has, when I went and checked it, the steering box is intact on there, intact-ish, and the steering was actually, it felt pretty smooth, smoother than this one. So here it is. This is a Series 3 as well. So the box is going to be the same as that one. I think we're looking at the same issue with the other one. You see there? That's exactly the same damage as on the other one. That's disappointing. After all that, it's got exactly the same issues as that one. There's two positives I can take from this though. One is that this, before I ripped it all apart, actually felt, when I moved the steering wheel, felt quite good. So it's possible when I put a column back on this and install the steering wheel properly, we might get that from that one, or it might be better at least. The other thing is, one of my patrons got in touch with me and said they had a very similar issue after rebuilding their steering box, and yet in practice, in actual driving, it felt fine. So that's something to hang on to. Checking on the steering relay, and then I'll get some paint on the bits I've blasted. Yes, it's now registering. So in pounds we're aiming at 15, which is there, to 27. That's where we are at the moment, where the black one is. But at least it's on the scale, which it wasn't before. What I'll do then is drain out what's in here. Drain it out here. Quite a dramatic improvement then already on the steering relay. It's got to improve quite a bit more before it's within spec, but there's hope. One of the things I've just painted is a bracket which holds the steering column, and the bracket fixes in here into these two captive nuts. These captive nuts, which I completely forgot about, are not just blocked, well this one's blocked with, I hope it's just paint, but they've also got zinc in it. I've got a tap and die set to clean them out, which really I should have done before fitting all this stuff in the way. So I've just bought a cheapo Imperial set, which has got the Imperial coarse and Imperial fine. This cost me about 20 quid, and it's a carbon steel set, and it's not what I'd use for actually making threads, but for cleaning them up it's going to be absolutely fine. I'm not going to get on there with the proper tool, but if I can get this in. this one. Crikey. Just leave that finger tight for now. So that's going to be, that's the top support for the steering column, and then the rest of it bolts onto there. I've just drained this out again and it still looks like brown soup. I'm going to try, what should I do? Yeah, let's flush a bit more through. I'm now moving it by hand without having to put a lever on there. I'm going to let it sit for a few hours this way up. I'll put the bolts in the top, flip it the other way up and let it sit for a few more hours. By that point, it's got to have some lubrication everywhere inside of it. So I can fit the track rod. So the track rod here can vary in length, as can all the other tubes. And the idea is that because one is normal threaded and one is reverse threaded, when these are in situ, you undo these clamps, which will be one at each end, and then you just turn the actual tube itself, and that will screw the joints on the end in or out. But there's an initial length to set it out. Where is the load to begin with? So we'll centre there. So these are now the same distance from the centre of that to the start of the rod each side, and between the middle of this one to the middle of this one is as specified here in the manual as the initial setting. They've all got to be adjusted yet to give it the, well, it's going to be lots of faffing about, but I have to work out the wheel alignment and all that kind of stuff with this yet. But we need an initial setting to start off with, which is what we've now got. It's Monday. By the end of this week I want to have the rear tub here painted and ready to go back on the rest of Kermit. The preparation for painting is going to be incredibly tedious, which is why I've hired some help. So when it comes to the existing paintwork on Kermit, we've got, I think Kermit was originally deep bronze green, as you can see here. That's the original paint. And at some point, what year was it?
2001.
2001, Mark repainted it all with this slightly different shade of green, which I think is Epsom green?
Ethanol green.
Ethanol green. Basically our plan, our mission today, is to sand back most of what you painted on and scuff up the factory layer.
Yeah.
Where it's been properly battered, like almost all of the interior of the rear here.
Yeah.
We'll probably end up going back to bare metal, but there's no necessity to go back to bare metal.
Yeah.
Yeah, the factory paint is going to be on pretty well. So if we can get back to that and get that keyed up,
Give it a lighter braid.
that would be fine.
Yeah, so what's the plan?
If we go 150, 240 and then 320,
Yeah.
and I'll paint on it with 320 and then take it from there.
Like a pile of bollocks, and now it can sound like any organ you want. And it's like... Like and subscribe.
It looks, from this angle, it looks like some kind of fleck-time camouflage, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's...
Oh, I'm very pleased with that, Mark. Thank you very much.
It's good. I mean, it seems a bit mad that I'm removing the paint that I put on there 22 years ago. I don't know whether that seems...
I think you should
a
be
bit
impressed that it
nihilistic or
stayed
not.
there 22 years.
Packet of port scratchings? Yeah, I mean, packet of port scratchings and I'm anybody's.
Well, the lowest I can get it is about £34. 27 is what we're aiming at. So we're still off of that, but it's much better than it was. Let's give one more go, a bit of flushing it through again. I'm of the opinion I shall use this one. Just get as good as I can, and then we'll put that in service, see what happens. Now I've got to get this old bearing out of here. So this is the steering column outer. This is the, it's the bearing with no balls. The slide hammer really. I've got one. Must have something. No, I don't. Here's the replacement. Okay. That. There's no play where there shouldn't be. I mean, there's play in there because it's not done up. I think that's going to be alright. Just as well, that's best of components got. It's probably the steering wheel I'm going to use. I've got a choice of these. Anyway, don't worry about that for now. Now this to be fitted, and so could, yeah, then we can sort out the relay as well. This is hydraulic thread sealant. I'm going to put it on the threads of the bolts that go in the bottom of the relay. Okay, that's that. Not this way. Now I need to fill it up with gear oil. So what we've got, this is going to slide in there, so through that bracket, and it's going to come into this bulkhead bracket, and on the other side it's going to have this bracket which also goes to the bulkhead. I've fixed in these bolts so that the steering box is attached to this bracket and to this bracket, but not to the bulkhead, because like I say, the bulkhead's going to have to be adjusted to match the rear tub when that goes on. I've got some rust converter here, and I'm using this stuff rather than usual phosphoric acid because this won't need rinsing. It goes on like a, I was going to say like a paint, a very thin paint I suppose. That's all dry now, all the rust converter. I gave it a second coat, left it overnight. Then I've been over the whole tub with vacuum cleaner and the air gun. Trying to get rid of as much dust as possible. So all the tack cloth does is just gets any dust that's still stuck on the surface. So after many hours of sanding, Mark and I got to this. So the whole lot is done to 320. I've made no attempt at all to put any filler on it or knock out any of the small imperfections. In fact, even here where it was properly stoved in, I've only roughly knocked it back out again, just enough to get the structure back in the rear there. This is going to be a working truck, so there's no point at all making it look like a showroom plastic, even if I had the patience to do such a thing. Once I've wiped this down, I'm going to use etch primer on everywhere where there's bare metal basically. So the etch primer has a fairly feeble acid in it. It's just single pack etch primer. When I spray it on, that acid will eat into the bare metal and just adhere on there a bit better than normal primer would. The fact that we sanded everything as well will also help the paint key in. So even what looked like a clean surface has still got plenty of dust in it. And of course if you leave that dust on, it's just the paint's going to stick to the dust rather than to the bodywork underneath and not adhere so well. Next stage on the steering is to sort out the wheel alignment. So I'm going to install this, which is the track rod, and then the actual alignment I can sort using this, which is a tool I made for my Range Rover about a decade ago. All it is a piece of round bar with a drilled and tapped M8 hole in that end, and then a piece of thread bar to screw into it. So we'll get to that in a moment. I'm going to put this in first. Now, I'm not an expert on wheel alignment, obviously, but the gist of what I've understand about it is that on something like a Defender, you want the front wheels to be in parallel, a four-wheel drive vehicle. On a rear-wheel drive vehicle, like the series here, well, mostly rear-wheel drive, you want the front wheels to toe in just a tad. When I say just a tad, according to the manual, it's 2mm between the wheel rims at the horizontal point at the front and at the back, and it should be 2mm less at the front than it is at the back, and that's what this is for. So the actual measurement doesn't matter, it's the difference that we're after. So my measuring stick is sat on top of the diff and it's tight up against each wheel. Offer it up on the front of the wheel. We might be there actually. Yeah, very, very close. Of course, that shouldn't be a surprise because I've set the track rod to exactly what it said in the manual. Do it the other way. I'm going to wind this in a bit. Yeah, and I can see it's parallel to this track rod, so it's a reasonable measurement. And so now if I offer it up to the back, sat on the diff, there should be a 2mm gap. This ruler is bang on 2mm in its thickness. Ring stick against the rim there. So I can slide the ruler in there. Yeah, I think we're there. Okay, let's hit the stops there. We haven't hit the bulkhead there, so there's a bit more room to go there, potentially. We're on the bump stops there. All the players here, but it's just because I haven't done this bolt up, so that's good. And we've got a play here where the bracket is twisting because it's not bolted to the bulkhead yet. So this will all stiffen up a great deal. Yes, we've got full range of movement. This is what I've ended up with. It's very close to the manual actually. So this one here is pointing straight ahead, this arm, and this one here is one spline off of 90 degrees to that one. That seems to work out. I'll put these clamps on and that'll be that. It feels much smoother than it did when I was just testing the shaft on its own in the steering box. around the middle of the steering I can just about feel the notchiness. Really quite interested to see what that's like when it's actually driving. It will probably not be noticeable. So as far as the steering setup goes, we can now go lock to lock, and it's hitting the steering stops on the wheels, not in the steering box, which I think is the crucial thing. Right, good. That was actually a lot more straightforward than I was expecting, which possibly means I'm missing something there, but I'm sure we'll find out if I am. That'll do for now anyway. So yesterday we had etch primer, and today it's going to be primer again, but this time high build primer. So I'll have to leave that 24 hours. Then what I'll do is actually denib it, so give it a light sanding before the undercoat goes on. There wasn't any point sanding between the etch primer and this primer. Well, I didn't think so anyway. That's all we can do for today. I'll put the paint away and back in the workshop, I guess. What we have here are the remnants of Kermit's fuel lines, which I won't be using. I will be using the fittings on the end. There's one I've taken off because I'll need this fitting to attach to the fuel tank. The line itself is, well, it's in pretty bad condition. I thought I had a replacement, and I went and found a load of, this is airline from HGV, which was out in the bushes. It's slightly the wrong size. I think this is metric. The size that I need, these bits of fuel line are off of a Discovery, which had a 300 TDI engine in it, and I'm taking this as a reference. I think we're looking at 3/8 and 5/16. And the only small HGV stuff that I had out there is 8mm, which is just fractionally too big. So I've ordered some more of this. I can't do much in the meantime, but I can fit the filter, and I can sort out the plumbing at the engine end. So I can put the filter anywhere where it's convenient, because these lines that come to and from the engine, they've got to be changed anyway because they're way too short. Unless I'm going to put the filter down there, which I'm not. So if I put a filter somewhere up there, it's at the high point then, which means that this bleed screw on the top will be the highest point of the whole system, and I can bleed air out easily. This is that little offcut from the Discovery. That's the way, isn't it? Yeah, I've been doing that way up. Go from there up to there. I need some heat. This is just practice. Obviously I could cut this off, but I'm not used to working with. Now this end's going to be a bit more tricky because we've got an olive to and an insert. That's it. So that can go there. It's on. Now I've got to get the insert in. And that's that. As this screws in, it bites down on the olive, which bites down on the insert. Everything grips snugly. Okay, we're on. Okay, now I've got to put another banjo on the other. Let's get the other pipe. Let's put this pipe on and get the other one off. It's just a tiny bit on the threads. There's no chance of it getting in the system. So it goes there. This is the other pipe here. This is the other offcut I've got, the larger one, and I think I can do something with this. I can actually use both of those bends, I reckon. Let's see, let it go. Go up there. I've allowed some give in the system here because the engine rocks when you're revving it. And that one, I think, very nice there. Over there. And so we're going, that feeds through there. Over there, down to there. That is pretty neat, I think. That's as far as I can go on the fuel system until I get the long lengths. That's good. It's good to have a bit of practice on setting these things in. This is Kermit's heater box. I think it's reusable. I think it's fine. Well, needs a clean up and a coat of paint. That will sit there. Got big blobs of zinc in there. Good. I can get in the blasting pile then. Well, today, as you can probably tell by the fact that the entire structure's moving around, we're actually in the middle of a storm. So in the last episode I was grumbling about the amount of play in the gear stick, And it turns out there's a little screw on the side to take that plate off, and this is it here. It was just that screw had stripped its threads, so I've replaced it with a little bolt, and that's much more reasonable, so that's good. Also, last episode when I was installing the handbrake, I was on about the little spring and I couldn't work out where to put it, and I was questioning whether it was even needed. Now I owe thanks to a patron of mine, Andy, thank you Andy, for pointing out not only where the spring goes, so it goes from down here down to the gearbox mount, but also the reason for having it on there, and it's to keep the brake off, because you can imagine when it's bouncing around here, it's possible that the brake engages, and that would be problematic when you're going along. It goes onto something that looks a bit like a washer. Well, it actually looks like this. I went through all my Land Rover bits. This is what it looks like, the thing that the spring attaches to, except much bigger. So if you look, there's the nut that came off. Obviously it's a lot bigger than this one, but that's pretty much what the thing looks like. I'm not going to buy one because it just seems silly. I'm going to make one out of this big plate washer. So with that edge shaved off, it now fits on the gearbox mount, and we just need a little ditty hole opposite that. Just now. Springs. These. Good. It got pretty blowy for a while there yesterday, and then it just hammered down with rain all night long. You can probably see the zips taking a right beating here. I'm quite impressed the whole thing held together though. I'm not complaining. What I'm on with today is going to put the yellow undercoat on, so the undercoat is going to go underneath the sandglow. Bring it in for close up and you should be able to see why I'm not going to go overboard with the sanding. There's just no point. It's had a rough life and it doesn't offend me that it's somewhat battered. I'm okay with that. This is just as well. There we are after one coat of the undercoat. That went on pretty well, certainly a lot better than the bulkhead when it was super cold. I put it on as thickly as I could just to see if it would actually be enough with one coat. I'm not sure yet. I'll let this flash off for half an hour or so and then have a look. That's flashed off now, it's just a little tacky. Yeah, I'm going to put another coat on it. It's going to be either another coat of undercoat or an extra coat of top coat. I might as well. Yeah, it's really hard to tell because we've got the entire room is green. but I think it will benefit from another coat just to make it a bit more opaque. It'll just help me give a proper depth of colour to the final top coat. Time for a top coat. This is properly dry now. So we're going close on the best lit area. You can see that's... And again, yes, there's plenty of imperfections in there. I'm not troubled about that at all. But the paint itself, for an undercoat, that's come up really well. So that's exactly what was intended. So I'm just giving it a very brief rub down just to get rid of any bugs that landed in it as it was going off, or any stray bits of dust or anything like that, any little lumps. Oh, and it was definitely the right call to give it 2 coats of undercoat. So in my situation, in this particular circumstance, it's 1 coat of primer, or in this case it was 1 coat of each type of primer, 2 coats of undercoat, and I'm expecting to do 2 coats of top coat as well. But I should be able to do both of those coats today. Tack cloth again. New fuel lines, 3/8 and 5/16. This fitting then that I've salvaged has got to go on here, obviously with a bit of heat. But then the other end has got to go onto, hopefully go onto one of these fittings, which was salvaged from the series tank. This is a 200 TDI fitting. These are Series 3 fittings. So what I'm going to do is put this fitting on one end, and then we'll route it through the chassis and see what's what. Get some good use out of Grandad's blowtorch. It does save firing up the, the forge, which would be a bit overkill, wouldn't it? Which one are we after? This one. That's wrong. Keep that bit sorted. On. New fuel filter. There we go. Cool. Done the breather pipes. I've got a nice new filler neck on. Put that on now as well. I think that's it. I think that's everything I need to do to the truck before we can stick the rear body back on it. Just got to finish painting the thing now. All ready for top coating with black now. That's today's main mission. It's windy today, which is not helping at all. I'm going to have to do something about it's blowing up on the side.
If you're involved in a low speed scrape, if all cars were just covered in rubber matting, everything would be a lot less stress, wouldn't it?
You know, like a bumper around the outside.
Well, maybe not that.
And if they only went at 3 miles an hour and they had a stick thing going up.
Yeah, with a random tattooed guy hanging off of it, charging you money.
Yes, the roads would be far safer. And we'd all move at a more gentle pace.
Yeah. Well, the paint's certainly stuck on. Yeah.
That's more or less as intended, so that's good.
It's all looking pretty good. Cool, I never thought it would end up this colour.
You never thought you'd see your old truck looking like that.
I know, it's a bit mad, isn't it? I'd always thought about putting a 200 TDI in it, but never actually thought it would happen. Yeah, it looks like it's supposed to be there as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can't quite see where we're at. A bit far off.
Ooh, very close.
That is that.
Yeah, pretty good.
Oops, can you check me that one? Do we need...
Just put the clip.
Oh, that's already got one on there.
Yeah. Enough?
Hang on. Right, lower. Lower, lower, lower. That's a bit better.
Yeah, that's pretty much there.
I think. Fine seeing it in this state now. When the tub goes on, it's all,
Yeah.
you know, it's a sign of it coming together then. You just know that bit of cosmetics left
Yeah.
and electrics.
I'm well happy with that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's spot on. that's going to be it for this instalment. Next up, I'm going to do all the plumbing for the engine and start on the front wings. But before doing any of that, this bulkhead has got to get to its final position. This is all loose. So that's got to get in its final position so that the door gaps work out. So all that to come. See you later.
Not sure how far before we hit obstacles. Okay. Nice. Yay!